Hey there, happy Monday, and welcome to the Hash on CoinDesk TV. I am Zach Seward. I'm joined today by Will Foxley, Jen Sanasi, and George Kalutis in for Naomi Brockwell. We got lots to get to, and Will's starting us off today on the big global story. What is up, Will?
That's right. So we're talking about Ukraine, we're talking about Russia. Most of the conversations this last week and over the weekend were about this conflict, which is definitely heating up across multiple different parts, especially here with crypto. We've seen crypto enter the conversation, maybe unfairly at times, but in this case, it does seem that it is an interest and a pain point for the Ukrainian government that is asking now for certain exchanges to clamp down on Russian crypto and then also the Russian civilian population's ownership of crypto. So the Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Digital Transformation has asked for all major crypto exchanges to block addresses of Russian users. That would include ordinary Russian civilians who have nothing to do with the conflict, which is definitely a breach of most people's understandings of both what cryptocurrency is supposed to do and then also the obligations for most centralized exchanges. There was a few exchanges that complied. One particularly that was a Ukrainian exchange, but see, these larger exchanges like Binance, Kraken, others have refused to do so. They're only going to do it if they are asked to do it. This also comes after Russia was debanked from SWIFT this past weekend, or a number of financial institutions part of SWIFT were debanked. That's a huge blow to Russia's involvement in the larger financial landscape. And so now everyone's talking about Bitcoin. Can Bitcoin be an alternative for the Russian government to start sending payments globally? To me, I think that conversation is a little bit of a red herring. It doesn't have much to do with it right now. I think people are just talking their own bags. But at the same time, it is important to see that the Ukrainian government is taking a look at the situation and they're saying, hey, there's civilians with crypto or there's people in Russia with crypto, and we want those assets to also be seized or censored in the same way that the West is sanctioning other Russian assets across the board. Zach, I want to throw this one up to you.
Yeah, I mean, just the financial aspect of this conflict continues to get more and more interesting. I mean, just to think, last week we were talking about Canada's Prime Minister seeking to freeze the accounts of protesters in his own country, and now we're seeing asks of the same nature being bandied about in a time of conflict and war. So I think, again, like as we mentioned previously, right? Like this intermediary layer of these centralized exchanges that exist to serve customers who are looking to enter the space, that layer is very much at risk of, being censored or being taken down at any given time. And we're seeing these conversations unfold with we want these centralized exchanges to comply with these asks for whatever reason. Those base layers on which these centralized players sit. That's not the case, right? You can't ask someone to freeze, a self-custody Bitcoin wallet. You can't ask someone to freeze an Ethereum wallet that's just, out there that you access through MetaMask. So I think there is this sort of continued education around what these systems can and can't do. I think there hasn't been too much confusion. I think maybe in the mainstream press, there's been a little bit of confusion as to what is being frozen here when we talk about these things. When we talk about whether or not sort of centralized exchanges can and will comply with orders to freeze accounts. It has happened in the past. It will happen in the future. But stuff like on the blockchain that you hold on chain through either a hardware wallet or through a MetaMask or something like that, really we haven't seen the ability to freeze those things to date. So interesting conversations are unfolding around again this bigger picture of crypto self-custody, among many other things, right? And this could be a major test case of whether or not a country or countries can exist outside of the existing financial system, as is included with SWIFT and all that stuff. So tons to dig into here. By no means is war a crypto story, but we are really seeing a lot of interesting crypto conversations spring up as financial institutions kind of get weaponized versus one state or the other. So I'm going to toss this. I saw both hands up. I think George maybe beat Jen to the punch there. So George, take it away from there for your thoughts.
Sure. I want to latch on to one thing that Will mentioned where regular people's accounts would be shut down. You're not going to accidentally, shut down Putin's Kraken account, stopping crypto exchanges from coming out of Russia, right? So we're looking at quote unquote the bad guys and we want them to be sanctioned, and you don't want them, buying, selling oil or weapons or whatever. You're not going to go through Kraken or Binance and shut down that account. They're not pushing money through there. So it seems just like an attack on, okay, we're at war with Russia, so we're going to be at war with just the Russian people as well. It's kind of this complicated thing that doesn't do anything. So I agree with you, Will. That's my short thing there. Jen, anything to add?
Well, I was going to say the same thing. The Russian people didn't ask for this war. They didn't ask for their economy to be crippled. They didn't ask to be cut off from the Western world. And so this solution just seems crazy to me. I know we heard in that article that you mentioned at the top of the segment, Will, Binance and Kraken. And I wanted to read a quote from one of Binance's spokespeople. They said, "We're not going to unilaterally freeze millions of innocent users' accounts. To ban people's access to their crypto would fly in the face of the reason why crypto exists." And that really mirrors what Jesse Powell was saying in the tweet that we spoke about, I think, last week. And Will, I'm not sure if you're going to bring up this tweet, but I just want to say at the end of the article, Jesse Powell responded. He said, "If we're going to voluntarily freeze financial accounts of residents of countries unjustly attacking and provoking violence around the world, step one would be to freeze all U.S. accounts." And so we see these leaders of the crypto exchanges really speaking out and really talking about that crypto ethos. And I think speaking to that education piece, Zach, that you were talking about, really educating people about why crypto was built and why it's here. We've had for so long these stories about people just getting rich off of crypto and getting suites at baseball games, but this is really why it was invented. And it's nice to see these leaders really standing up for the ethos. But Will, I'll pass it off to you.
You both brought up really important ideas. The first one I want to talk about is the collateral effects of crypto being seized by ordinary civilians, right? These people have nothing to do with the conflict. It's becoming more and more clear that the Russian government under the Putin regime is more or less directing all of this conflict. And the average Russian citizen has no interest in their son or daughter being in the Donbass or being involved in this conflict at all. And yet now we're seeing crypto, which is supposed to be uncensorable money, being used as collateral taken away from ordinary civilians. And then it's in the same manner that having it's not to the same degree, but the same manner that if your house is hurt in a conflict, that's also a loss of an asset. If you lose your crypto, it's also a loss of an asset. Obviously, those two things are not the same. Losing your house and losing your Dogecoin, very different things. But the principle remains the same. If you have these ordinary civilians that are somehow marginalized within a conflict, they're going to lose assets either way. The second thing I thought was really interesting, and I just noted on there again, is that the average Russian citizen doesn't seem to have an interest in being involved with this at all, and that we're starting to see some cracks form at the basis because this war and this conflict has escalated more than other people thought it was going to escalate. It is starting to involve other groups that other people did not predict to involve. And Russian citizens are the ones who are having to pay for this. Are already seeing some odd instances of racism or just at least some, antagonism against the Russian people themselves for this conflict, when it's very clear that there's a madman with the steering wheel on top. Jen, I want to throw it to you for the next topic, though.
Yeah, so we're staying in Russia, and this time we're talking about American tech giants. So they're facing pressure from Russia and the West to respond to the conflict in Ukraine, further highlighting the power they hold when it comes to global discourse. So analysts in this article are saying that the conflict could accelerate the fracturing of the internet. So far, this is what's happened. Russian officials have restricted access to Meta's platforms. Facebook said it's been fact-checking and labeling news from state-owned media outlets and is prohibiting ads from state-run media. And YouTube says it will pause the ability for several Russian channels to monetize. So a lot to talk about here when it comes to American tech companies and the role they play in information. And so, Zach, I think I will toss it up to you for your first take.
Yeah, I mean, the information environment is very fraught in times of 21st century war, right? Like people are looking to, leverage information, disinformation, misinformation to various ends. And I think it's something that these companies are really thinking about. It's really hard to gauge what is the right role, what is the right way to be involved in these conflicts. If you are a Facebook, if you are a Twitter, if you are a YouTube, how do you sort of seek to curtail the worst of misinformation and disinformation without stifling free speech? And I think that's something that platforms increasingly are trying to reckon with. And I don't think anyone's come up with a clear and good example of how to do it correctly. That's going to be a big challenge. I think the flip side of this conversation as it relates to blockchain and related technologies is that, when there isn't an intermediary to lend that judgment, those outcomes aren't necessarily better, right? When we have just rampant misinformation, uncensorable content on various blockchain platforms being out there, whether it was the January 6th insurrection here in the US or other global events, some of these platforms that aren't censorable by design don't always present a better outcome. So I think, again, here in the 21st century, information is very much part of the warfare calculus, and I don't envy these companies right now as they try to figure out how to be involved in a way that's productive. I'm going to pass it to Will, though. I saw his hand was up.
Yeah, it's like the flip side on this headline, and this is looking at like the software side, right? Like the human interaction side. A headline that caught my eye was actually on the hardware side. So that's like how the chips are manufactured. It seems like TSMC, which makes most of the chips for a lot of these larger players like Apple, and make all the chips for Apple's iPhones, for Apple laptops. They're also sanctioning the Russian government. They're also sanctioning, therefore, Russian civilians who are accessing these chips. Essentially, what this means going forward is that Russian civilians will have a lot less access to cutting-edge hardware and regular things like an iPhone than they would have had in the past because of the Putin regime's choice to invade the Ukraine and escalate this conflict. Again, we're just keep honing in on that idea that Russian civilians are really having to pay here, along with Ukrainians who are on the other side of the gun. For this story here and this headline, like I don't think that those long tails are really being thought about. Right now, there could be a fracturing of the internet, but a lot of these Russian civilians won't have access to the internet in the same meaningful way they used to, because they won't have access to iPhones, they won't have access to MacBooks, they won't have access to like a Dell laptop, because they've been cut off from the rest of the global community and they aren't able to manufacture these things themselves. Jen, I want to throw this one back to you, though, for your take.
Yeah, so there was an interesting piece of the article that I didn't know, that President Putin signed a law into policy just, I think, weeks or months ago, that requires companies with an audience of more than 500,000 people to set up offices in Russia, so that if they are found to break the law, they can be held responsible. And that was really interesting to me, because how do we define a company with an audience of more than 500,000 people, right? And if governments are going to start to do this, or have the power to do this, someone who has 500,000 subscribers on a YouTube channel could be held accountable for misinformation that doesn't align with what a corrupt government, what a to align with. And so that was really scary to read. But George, I'll pass it up to you for final thoughts.
Yeah, I have a very brief thought here. It seems like all the headlines around this are very American centered, whatever, because a lot of it has been focused on this misinformation idea, right? That's kind of been the talk about since 2016 here in the US. But I think something that I haven't seen anything about, so I could have just been missing it, is Facebook powers WhatsApp, and WhatsApp is used by a lot of people, not to just get information, but to just communicate with their friends and family. So there might be an angle here where, if Facebook, God forbid, gets banned there, that has ripple effects beyond just, you can't look at cats on the internet or read some scathing article about Putin. People aren't going to be able to talk to each other. They're going to have to figure out either using Telegram or using Signal or something else. So I think there are more far-reaching effects potentially because of how entrenched big tech is. But we have our American lens over here, and we're thinking, oh, what ads could be run, or what Russian hackers can make me vote for someone if I didn't want to vote for them, or whatever. So that's something I think is not being talked about, maybe should be talked about a little bit more.
All right, for another day, we're going to take a quick break here on The Hash, and when we get back on the other side of the break, we're going to talk about Bitcoin and its environmental footprint. We're going to get George nice and riled up on this one. It's going to be fun. Stick with us for that, and then we have another story even after that here on The Hash on a Monday.
Be civil.
Stick with us. Take a break. We'll be civil. See you soon.
Hi, I'm Nicholas Day, CoinDesk Managing Editor for Global Policy and Regulation, and you're watching CoinDesk TV.
And we're the Hash, and we're back. So we have a new piece of environmental FUD. A couple of mainstream outlets picked up a research report that claimed that Bitcoin is getting even dirtier. The research report is paywalled, so I haven't had the chance to read it, but the basic premise is this. China banned Bitcoin mining, and since China was super clean energy, now Bitcoin is only using, I think the number they said was 25% renewable energy sources. Two interesting tidbits here. One, the arguments against Bitcoin mining before were, oh my God, China mines it. They aren't using that good, clean American coal. They're using the dirtiest coal there is. Now that those miners left and ended up in places like Kazakhstan and the US, I don't really know what that means here. And I'm not part of the Bitcoin Mining Council. I'm in the Pleb Mining Council, like my friend Will here. But is this article and report just going to ignore the claim that the BMC themselves said that Bitcoin mining is 66.1% renewable? Maybe we should take that with a grain of salt, because maybe that's a bit of, hey, cigarettes are good for you, says the Marlboro Man. But one reality of Bitcoin mining that will remain true, and that's something I want to focus on versus just tearing apart a research report, is that Bitcoin mining demands cheap, abundant energy, and that's just what renewables are. So it will look for those. And I want to throw it straight to my mining friend here, Will, to add on some smart stuff there, because I don't have much else to say.
Yeah, just a quick outtake there. Do run a content at a Bitcoin mining firm. So take everything I said with a lot of salt and maybe some hash on the side too. I think you are totally correct here that there's like two sides of the argument, right? We have people like DeVry, who has been a well-known Bitcoin hater forever. He works at a central bank. Central banks, again, hate Bitcoin. That's just like a common knowledge thing. They're basically in like two products that don't work together would be Bitcoin and central banks. He's always been hating on Bitcoin mining, always says that it's bad for the environment. It comes out with a new paper like this about once a year. On the other side of the conversation, we have people who work in the industry who are more or less shamelessly promoting it. And I think at times they do try good faith effort to build models for understanding Bitcoin mining, understanding the energy consumption of it. You just mentioned that report from the Bitcoin Mining Council that put the renewable value about like 60-something percent, 66%. I've seen other data that's been in between there. I think at the end of the day, that question is almost irrelevant though, because of the stories that we were just talking about a second ago. Ukraine, Russia, uncensorable money. How much does that have a value? And what kind of energy are you willing to push into that system in order to facilitate uncensorable transactions? My estimation is it's basically priceless, right? I'd almost support Bitcoin mining being used on any energy source as long as it's not going to totally annihilate the environment, because it's on uncensorable money. It's a human rights issue. And that's what these values always overlook. Mainstream media always overlooks that conversation. Same thing happened last week in Canada. We saw that these Canadian truckers, they're parking their trucks in downtown Ottawa. Canadian government therefore went after their assets. What did they have as an alternative to fund their protest? They had Bitcoin. People start sending them Bitcoin. And whether you agree with the protests or not in Canada, the fact remains that you had uncensorable money, uncensorable assets that could fund a political movement in a way that no political movement has ever been able to be funded in human history. And that's a powerful statement. So if you're looking at these numbers, yes, the renewable question is still out there, but we haven't had an asset like this before. And we don't measure other things in the same manner. We don't measure light bulbs, how many light bulbs are used from coal energy versus renewable energy, how many cars, how many, whatever you take, whatever system you're using for creating value in human life. We don't really do that too often. For whatever reason, we just do it for Bitcoin. George, I want to throw back it up to you. Jen, maybe you had a hand. I don't know if I saw it or not.
I can go
George
first.
had his hand up, so I'll pass it to him and then.
Cool.
Okay.
Because that's just my go-to for mining stories.
Okay. Will, that last thing you said is actually super important. You don't talk about how many light bulbs are used or powered by coal mining, because we can't really do that in any reasonable way. We could do that with Bitcoin mining, because Bitcoin mining is, compared to everything else, incredibly transparent. Another thing I want to touch on that may or may not have been touched on in this article, but is sort of in this energy FUD discussion, is the idea that Bitcoin uses energy that if they didn't use that energy, something else could use that energy. And it's like, who's the moral arbiter here? Who's going to decide who uses the energy? It's kind of a stupid argument. Sorry, I hate using that word, but it is a stupid argument because we go back to these other conversations we've been having, and somehow everything gets tied into this Ukraine-Russia thing. And this, we talked about Russia being de-swifted or debanked, but there was a lot of conversation about that not happening because in Germany, they shut down the nuclear plants and they needed oil and natural gas from Russia. This whole energy story is sort of intertwined. What if we, set up Bitcoin miners to take energy from, all the renewable sources? They get a lot of revenue from that, or these utilities comes get a lot of revenue from that. They can put up these nuclear plants so they don't have to depend on Russian oil. I don't know. There's a lot there. I didn't really make sense, I don't think, but I think there are bits and pieces people could take from that. Zach, I want to throw it to you,
Beautiful.
Unless Jen is next. I don't know who's next.
I'm just coughing over here. No, I did want to say, I think you're right. Like, yeah, there you go. Thank you, East Denver. Appreciate it. So yeah, Bitcoin mining, I think what you're saying, George, is it is transparent. Like the system is transparent, but what is not transparent and what I think could be more transparent, and I think that miners should take this upon themselves, is to make some sort of environmental cost dashboard that sort of mirrors the on-chain transparency that exists in the process of Bitcoin mining. Because I think this conversation is not going away, right? This conversation has been around for as long as Bitcoin has been around, and it needs to change. We keep falling into this same back and forth. And I think these publicly traded Bitcoin mining firms could really take it upon themselves to make some of these more transparent energy usage dashboards that sort of advance this conversation in a meaningful way, rather than just us, going to the back and forth that Will was describing earlier, where it's like, you have the hater number and you have like the booster number, and somewhere in there is the truth, but we can't quite tell. So I think if I'm a Bitcoin mining firm with with shareholders, with a big market capitalization, I think I want to invest in making sure that some of these processes, these off-chain inputs that go into mining Bitcoin, are made more clear, so that we can have some data points to advance this conversation. But until then, I think we're going to have the same back and forth. But Jen, I'll throw it down to you for last thoughts here.
I feel like last year we were about Bitcoin miners invest and the potential of those sustainable Bitcoin mining setups could be in areas where the that didn't previously have access to these types of things. And conversation come up again. And I mean, maybe it was an opinion. Why are we not talking about that? I feel like that was being spoken last year.
I think I understood what she was saying.
Or
you're like sort of.
I think I got enough out of
robot style. Yeah,
you're in and out. Oh, am I going in and out now too?
You got it. You could pick it up.
My mic breaking.
Go for it.
Okay. Yes, I think a lot of the conversations last year were about renewables, were about how Bitcoin is changing and becoming more renewable focused. That's what I understood from your question going in and out there. That's still the case. There's been a lot of studies on renewable energy. There's been a huge talk about flared and wasted and stranded energy being used for Bitcoin mining. That's still part of the conversation. I think with this article and this report here, it gets back to what Zach was talking about, is how transparent is your information? Where is your information coming from? And lastly, and perhaps most key, is what number is good enough for the haters to accept? If Bitcoin mining is 25% renewable, 50% renewable, 75% renewable, even 100% renewable, is that a good enough number? And even people in cryptocurrency are divided by this issue. That's why Ethereum is moving to proof of stake. Even 100% renewable energy on Bitcoin for Bitcoin mining is not good enough for them. They would rather use a system that uses almost no energy, proof of stake, and uses another consensus mechanism in order to have their blockchain function. So I think there's a whole conversation is going to continue happening, just like what Zach said. This isn't going away. This is going to be a thing in 20, 25 years if Bitcoin is still around. And if Bitcoin doesn't explode some rainy day, this conversation is still going to be happening in 25 years. So at least we can keep sharpening our takes on it. That's the highlight of it. But let's go to our last topic. Zach, is that you?
Wow.
Talking about NFTs?
Just imagining being on the hash for 25 years. That's really something. All right.
Maybe I'll have a beer.
We'll We'll do that one day. We should do like the fast forward, like age filter one day. It's like, reporting the hash 2047. All right. Anyway, sorry.
What was that? I can't hear you.
Let's go to the land of corporate NFT strategy. Corporate NFT strategy. That's what this story is all about. KPMG, which is an auditing and consulting giant, the Canadian outpost of KPMG, is going further down the crypto rabbit hole, right? They bought Bitcoin and Ethereum back in February. Now they're buying a World of Women NFT for 25 ETH. They purchased this NFT largely in part to be able to be informed as they inform clients in turn who are looking at standing up corporate NFT strategies. So this is an interesting little progression from this company down the crypto rabbit hole. And I am going to throw it to Will for his initial thoughts.
So I don't know NFT markets very well, but when I first saw this, my alarm bells went off because crypto's dominated by men. It's just like a fact. And I think a lot of people come in here trying to make a quick buck. And I looked at this and I was like, okay, is this like an all dude team just trying to make an NFT and then make a quick buck based on like this idea of trying to involve more women in the space? And that was a pretty cynical first look at it. So I looked into the project a little bit. It actually seems pretty interesting where they have a bunch of different women on the board as founders and as artists. And I believe that they're donating some of the proceeds to different causes around bringing more women into tech. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's part of it. And so that's an interesting part of like the corporate governance part, right? If you look at ESG, it's not just like the environmental thing we were talking about a second ago. It's also about the social and the governance. And by moving into this NFT space as actively promoting women in art and women in tech, then you're basically hitting two birds with one stone. You're becoming a more tech affluent company, and you're also promoting values that a company should aspire towards. So that's pretty cool. On the flip side, I still don't get NFTs. I don't understand why a corporate team needs to have anything to do with like an NFT strategy. Zach, like, can you imagine a year ago me telling you that KPMG is going to have an NFT corporate strategy? Like, that's just, it's not something I would have ever thought of. And I don't know if it's going to survive either. Do you think that's going to be a thing in a year? Like, I thought NFTs were going to die like 3 times last year. They kept coming back. I feel stupid.
I mean, hey, again, you know, Visa did it. Visa bought a CryptoPunk not too long ago, and they look pretty smart for doing that. So I think, you know, hey, Visa did it. I can imagine people knocking on KPMG's door and be like, hey, what's this NFT thing about? And they're like, well, let's buy an expensive NFT to figure that out. So I think that's what they did. But these little consultancies in the metaverse and in the NFT stuff, it's sort of that unsexy, like enterprise level adoption of some of these more novel use cases. So I think it's always worth noting sort of these experiments. But those are my thoughts. Jen, very curious for yours.
I've been slowly moving around in my box to see if I'm freezing, and so I apologize. But I think that this is different than Visa buying the CryptoPunk. I think probably a lot of KPMG's clients are asking them about NFTs and NFT strategy. And I think them getting into the World of Women project is a great way for them to explain to their clients the benefits of an NFT, especially if we're looking at corporate social responsibility aspect that you were talking, Will. And so there's a similar project called Women Rise. And I always use that project when someone asks me to explain NFTs. So Women Rise, it was founded by a Pac American artist. She's super passionate about female education and girls' education around the world, and proceeds from primary and secondary sales go to supporting funds like the Malala Fund. And I think if you have a story like that, it's really easy for people to understand why they should get involved in a project like this. And so I think it's pretty clever of them to announce this just before Women's Month. I'm curious if there's going to be more announcements during Women's Month when it comes to diversity and inclusion and maybe more support for the project. And so I think it is interesting for them, and it will be an easy way for them to learn and educate their clients. George, up to you.
Yeah, I agree with kind of everything everyone has said here. Will, I also just don't get NFTs. I also don't care, really. Is it going to be around?
You guys.
Maybe.
We can both stay poor and not have fun.
Worry.
It's okay.
And GMI.
And while it's kind of weird,
so boring.
that I know we are. And while it's kind of weird that KPMG bought NFTs, when I think about it, maybe not so much, right? Like this, although the article said it's a consultancy, they also have audit and tax things that they do. So if they're, you know, I don't know how much they put down. I forgot what the number was, but even if it was $25,000, say they paid $25,000 for NFT to be viewed as the people who can do the NFT tax stuff when these companies this year inevitably start doing NFT stuff. If they win like 2 clients off of that, that's worth it. So from an audit and tax perspective, if that's what you do as a company, it makes sense to do it. I actually am weirdly on the side of, yeah, KPMG should have definitely done this. That's kind of cool. Good for them. Although I still don't get NFTs.
Yep. Credit to Eli Tan. He was able to get that. It was 25 ETH. He was able to, that's about 70,000 ish, I think, at purchase. Also revealed that they have the KPMGCA.eth, the ENS domain name. So they're also using that, which is pretty interesting. And now we can see what other transactions they'll do on chain. So yeah, pretty cool. All right, let's wrap it. That's the end of the show. That's the hash for Monday. We're shutting it down there. I'm going to go maybe drink some water, try to get this cough out of the way. We'll see what happens after that. I got Will here, Jen, George. Great show, everybody. We'll be back here again tomorrow on CoinDesk TV. Also on CoinDesk TV, 3 p.m. Eastern. Check out all about Bitcoin. Good stuff there. Lots of great stuff on the site, including the latest on the Ukraine-Russia conflagration and how it relates to the current financial system. So check that out, CoinDesk.com. We're here for you, and we'll be here tomorrow as well. All right, I'm Zach. Good times. Take it easy. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.